Thank you everyone for joining us for this session of Webinar Wednesday. Today we will be discussing the deployment of GeoSync GO workflows to GeoSync GO Plus. The idea here is that you would already have a workflow created. Today, as I mentioned, we're going to use the GeoSync GO Plus application for the deployment of our workflow. As most of you may know by now, or should know, that GeoSync GO Plus is a multi-platform application. Works on iOS, Android, and Windows. It has a web-based map designer, which we'll look at today, as well as you can use it to capture new data, edit data, and view and link media. And also, as you see here, has a integration to the Trimble GNSS receivers. So the first thing we want to talk about are workflows in general. Our workflows include a number of pieces. A workflow is basically your database. It is a very dynamic data set. Can be used locally on a PC. It can be hosted in our cloud service. It can be accessed from the mobile devices. So it's a very versatile data set. The workflow database itself is utilized for capturing data, new features, inspections, doing attribute updates. So basically, it's your database behind the layers and the forms and the reports that you're doing. The GeoSync GO workflow, as mentioned, includes a number of pieces. First, it's a user-definable table. It's a database. It can be used as your feature class or your data dictionary and/or your layer, and actually all of these. It's a very, as we mentioned, dynamic. It can be used not only as the feature class, but also as your data dictionary for collection and as the layer that you view on the mapping. It also includes forms. Forms are the way that are the process that we use to update, modify, or collect features that will be added into the database. So you have a form for those activities, inspections, new features, and even for the GNSS integration, we'll use the forms as your data dictionary. The workflow is also utilized for reporting and exporting data, as well as integration to other desktop GIS. The workflow wizard is the tool that you would use to create your workflow itself, the actual database table, the attributes that are included in the database, the forms, and such. It is a creation and customization tool. The user has total control over what the database and the forms are, what's included in them, how they're used, and how they're distributed. We won't go over all the detail of that today. There are other webinars that you can refer back to learn more about how to actually create those workflows that we'll be discussing today. The database, the workflow database, you have the workflow wizard uses your current database connection, whether you're creating a local database, accessing database across a network, or if your database is hosted in your GeoSync GO cloud service. So it accesses in any of these places where you have your data, your actual SQL database, if you will, stored. The workflow wizard actually works with that database no matter where it's stored. So the steps involved in deploying a workflow, i.e. your database and your forms to in this case, we're going to look at GeoSync GO Plus is our deployment method. It's where we're actually deploying our workflow to. So that where we'll start off in this webinar, we're actually going to look at GeoSync GO AM tools. You could actually use AM tools or desktop for this, the first part. So the first thing you need to do is create a project, a map project. You want to have a project available. And you'll notice from GeoSync GO AM tools, once you've logged into your account, you can simply go to the toolbar, click New Project, and it'll ask you for a name, just some basic information. It'll create a project. In this case, we've already have this project. I've created one called Building Inspection, and we have a project ID that is very important. You will refer back to this soon. Another thing we'll want to go ahead and do, if with our database, as I mentioned, we have reports that the user will be filling out to add or edit information in the database. There's a process that has to run before those reports are actually added, those information is actually changed in the database. You have the option of turning automatic cloud processing. If your database is in the cloud in your cloud account, we can actually turn on automatic processing where your reports and new features, edits are automatically added to the database. And basically what this does is it provides real-time map updates. So if I'm in the field, I add a new feature, within a few seconds, I'll see that feature on the map because it'll actually go through, be processed, added to the database, and updated. So that's a very nice feature. The next thing we'll want to do in GeoSync GO AM tools is to actually create our workflow. You can use it. AM tools has your workflow, or your workflow wizard is built in. It looks very similar to what's in GeoSync GO desktop. You just get to it in a different place. So you would create all your tables, the fields that you want to enter data for. You will also create your forms and assign those forms to a project. That's very important. The forms that we have, as I mentioned, that's how you have access to edit the database. You'll fill out a form and it will update the database. These forms are assigned to a specific project. In this case, our building inspection form is assigned to our building inspection project simply by clicking the check mark here for our building inspection project. And again, that's very important. Once you build your form, you have to assign it to the project that you want to have access to that form to be able to change the database. So next we'll leave AM tools and we'll go to GeoSync GO Plus. From here in GeoSync GO Plus, to start the process, you want to actually sign in with administrative privileges, whether that's your primary account ID and password or a user that you've created that has administrative privileges. Once you've signed in, you'll want to utilize the account settings. You won't actually open a map project. You'll go to account settings, and from there we'll want to actually set up our layers in our projects. So you'll want to add your workflow database that you've created, the data source. You'll actually want to add that as a source. And again, there are other webinars that describe these in more detail, but you'll want to add your new workflow database as a data source. You'll want to create a style for the features in that workflow. You want to create a layer that pulls from the sources and the styles. You'll create a layer. You'll also need a project if there's not already a project in GeoSync. If your project is, you'll create your project in GeoSync GO Plus, and you'll assign that new layer and tile sets, what have you. But in this case, particularly, we're thinking about the layers. You'll assign that layer to the project. So with this, you have a map project that has a view of the workflow database layer that you created. So you create the workflow database. We're utilizing that as a layer in our map project, so we can see the features on our map from our workflow database. Now, the next thing that we need to look at is in the account, we actually need to, as I mentioned, the workflow are multiple parts, primarily a database and your forms to update that database. So the thing we've already added the database as a feature, so we can see the data. So now, to be able to utilize those forms, we want to link those forms to our map project, so we can actually, not only can we see the data, but we can fill out forms to add or change the data. And the key piece here, what to do is from the account settings, you want to edit your project settings. That's the view we see here on the right. And the key to this is the project number. If you remember back in GeoSync GO AM tools, I mentioned our project that we created and the project ID. This project ID needs to be entered as the alias for your GeoSync GO Plus. That's the magic that ties the forms to your project to allow you to update the database that we added as a feature class or a layer. Excuse me. So once that's there and saved, the forms are actually published to this GeoSync GO Plus project. They're tied together, they're linked together. They're available in that project. So the next step is to actually utilize GeoSync GO Plus to deploy your map. And with this, of course, you may want to add other layers, other data sources, features, background maps, whatever. You may want to add searches. Again, they're all different pieces of different layers that you can add to the map. We have other webinars that describe those. But anyway, finish out your project. You'll want to use then once you deploy that project to other users, if you add other users, have them using the same one, but someone accesses this project, they have access to your workflow to capture and edit data or features. And you also have the ability not only to add and edit, but of course you can view the features and the data, as well as link photos, that kind of thing. But primarily with the workflow deals with the database layer, basically your feature class, what you're viewing and what you're adding to or editing. That's it. Thank you very much.